Growing up in the 1950s, Saturday mornings weren't about screens, they were about connection. You'd walk to the corner store and choose penny candy from glass jars. The milkman already knew what your family needed. Everything felt simple and real. Then one day, all of these things vanished and nobody noticed. Today, we're exploring 100+ things from the 1950s that vanished completely, and we never got back. Saturday mornings in 1950s, America started with the soft clink of glass bottles on the front porch. Before your feet hit the floor, the milkman had already been there, leaving fresh dairy in insulated metal boxes designed to keep everything cold until you woke up. This wasn't just delivery service. This was relationship. Your milkman knew whether you preferred whole milk or skim. If you needed extra cream on Thursdays and when your family went on vacation, he'd been coming to your house for years. You'd leave empty bottles out with notes requesting butter or eggs. The milkman arrived before dawn in white uniform, driving electric trucks that hummed quietly through sleeping neighborhoods. Then supermarkets exploded in the 1960s. Refrigerators got bigger. Families bought cars and drove to massive stores where milk sat cheaper. The milkman couldn't compete. By the 1970s, he vanished completely. In the 1950s, your telephone line didn't belong to just you. It belonged to your neighbors, too. This was called a party line, and 3, 4, sometimes 8 families all shared the same connection. When your phone rang, everyone's phone rang. Each family had specific ring patterns. 2 short rings and 1 long meant the call was yours. 3 short rings meant the Johnsons next door. You'd pick up and listen. If someone else was already talking, you'd quietly hang up and wait. That was the rule. Some neighbors listened in on conversations, eavesdropping on private calls. Arguments broke out over phone hogging. Teenagers tying up the line while someone needed urgent calls. Party lines were cheaper, so working-class families accepted the inconvenience. By late 1970s, phone companies phased them out entirely. Private lines became standard. Every phone call in the 1950s required effort. You couldn't tap a screen or press buttons. You had to dial. The rotary phone sat heavy on tables made of solid bakelite plastic, are connected with thick coiled cords. To make calls, you'd stick your finger in the hole next to numbers, pull the dial clockwise as far as it would go, then release and wait while it slowly clicked back. Each number took 3 seconds. If you were calling someone with 8s and 9s, you'd stand there 30 seconds just dialing. Mess up 1 digit? Start over completely. Phone numbers in the 1950s started with exchange names. You didn't dial 5551234. You dialed Klondike 51234. This wasn't instant communication. This was deliberate, slow, physical connection. Rotary phones stayed standard until early 1980s when touch-tone push-button phones replaced them. Step into any drugstore in 1950s, America, and you'd find the soda fountain. A long marble counter stretched the store's length, lined with spinning chrome stools covered in red vinyl. Behind the counter stood the soda jerk in white paper hat, ready to hand-mix your drink. This wasn't soda from bottles. This was theater. The soda jerk pumped flavored syrup, cherry, vanilla, chocolate, into tall glasses, added carbonated water from pressurized fountains, stirred with long spoons, and topped with whipped cream. A cherry Coke was Coke syrup mixed with cherry syrup and soda water, made fresh before you. Malted milks were thick shakes blended with malted milk powder. You'd sit at that counter after school, sipping 15-cent drinks, talking to friends for hours. Then fast food chains arrived. Friday night in the 1950s meant piling into family cars and heading to drive-in theaters. You'd pay per car, not per person, but so families crammed in, kids in pajamas sprawled in back seats, parents up front with popcorn and blankets. The drive-in was massive outdoor lot with rows of angled parking spots facing enormous screens, sometimes 10 stories tall. You'd pull into your spot, roll down windows, and hook heavy metal speakers over glass. The sound was tinny, but it didn't matter. You were outside, under stars, watching movies in private space. For teenagers, drive-ins weren't about movies. They were about freedom. You'd park in back rows, fog up windows, and ignore whatever played on screen. By 1958, over 4,000 existed across America. Then multiplexes arrived. 5 things down, and we've barely started. The milkman who knew your family, the party line where neighbors listened in, the rotary phone that demanded patience, the soda fountain where 15-cent drinks lasted hours, and the drive-in theater under stars. All gone. Tuesday afternoons, you'd hear the knock. Fuller Brush men never used doorbells. They knocked, polite but firm, and when you opened the door, there he stood, a man in suit and tie holding leather sample case packed with brushes, hairbrushes, toilet brushes, vegetable brushes, floor brushes, typewriter brushes, brushes you didn't know you needed. The Fuller Brush man was fixture in American life, visiting neighborhoods on regular routes like the milkman. He knew which houses bought what, tailoring his pitch accordingly. He wasn't pushy. He was helpful, knowledgeable, almost like home consultant. Housewives invited him in, offered coffee, and spent 20 minutes discussing how to clean grout or polish silver. Fuller Brush Company employed over 10,000 door-to-door salesmen at their 1950s peak. She wasn't just selling cosmetics, she was selling transformation. The Avon lady arrived at your door with catalog full of lipsticks, perfumes, hand creams, and powders, all affordably priced for women who couldn't afford department store brands. She was usually a neighbor, friend from church, or someone's aunt working part-time to bring in extra family money. She'd sit at your kitchen table, open her sample case, and let you try everything. Dab this perfume on your wrist. Test this lipstick shade. Feel how this lotion absorbs. Avon exploded in the 1950s, a using direct sales model that empowered housewives to become businesswomen without leaving their communities. By mid-1960s, Avon had over 100,000 representatives, and "Ding Dong, Avon Calling" became cultural catchphrase. Knowledge used to come in 24 leather-bound volumes. If you wanted to look something up in the 1950s, the capital of Peru, butterfly life cycles, Civil War causes, you didn't Google it. You walked to the bookshelf and pulled down heavy encyclopedia. Encyclopedia Britannica, World Book, Collier's. These weren't just reference books. They were status symbols, proof your family valued education. And they were expensive. A full set cost $300 to $500, equivalent to several thousand today. Most families couldn't afford them outright, so encyclopedia salesmen sold them door-to-door on installment plans. The salesman arrived unannounced, usually evenings when father was home. He'd sit in your living room, open sample volumes, and pitch the encyclopedia as investment in your children's future. Before you woke up, the milk was already there. Heavy glass bottles with cardboard caps, sitting in insulated metal boxes on your front porch. The bottles were thick, reusable, and embossed with local dairy names. You'd bring them inside, wipe off condensation, and pour fresh creamy milk processed just hours before. The cream always rose to top, forming thick layers you'd either shake back in or skim off for coffee. Milk bottles weren't just containers, they were part of Jean Juan's system. You'd rinse out empties, put them back in boxes, and leave notes for the milkman. 2 bottles, whole milk, 1 quart cream, 1 dozen eggs, please. He'd pick up empties, sterilize them at dairies, and refill them for next customers. Walk into any small-town general store in the 1950s and you'd find it. Glass case near the register filled with rows of penny candy. Tootsie Rolls, Mary Janes, wax lips, candy cigarettes, root beer barrels, atomic fireballs, Biddo honey, licorice whips, jawbreakers the size of marbles. Everything cost 1 cent. You'd walk in after school with a nickel in your pocket and face the most important decision of your day. 5 pieces of candy. Which 5? You'd stand there for 10 minutes, pointing at different candies, while the store owner scooped them into small paper bags. Penny candy wasn't just treats. It was economics lesson, teaching kids how to make choices, count change, and budget money. The candy counter created community. Kids gathered there daily, comparing selections, trading pieces, 10 items down. The Fuller brush man with his sample case, the Avon lady selling transformation, encyclopedia salesman pitching knowledge, milk bottles on the porch, and penny candy teaching kids about money. Every single tradition erased from American life. Every time your mother bought groceries in the 1950s, the cashier handed her something extra, S&H green stamps. These small perforated stamps came in sheets, and you'd get 1 stamp for every 10 cents you spent. At home, your family would sit around the kitchen table, licking stamps and carefully pasting them into collection books. Each book held 1,200 stamps. Once you filled enough books, you'd take them to the S&H Redemption Center, a warehouse-style store filled with toasters, blenders, lamps, toys, and appliances. Everything was free if you had enough stamps. Families saved for months to get a new mixer or a set of dishes. S&H green stamps became a national obsession. At their peak in the 1960s, the company printed 3 times more stamps than the U.S. Postal Service printed postage. Collecting stamps taught kids patience and delayed gratification. Gas stations in the 1950s didn't just sell fuel, they sold loyalty. Every time you filled up your tank, the attendant handed you trading stamps, gold bond, plaid stamps, top value, just like grocery stores did with S&H green stamps. You'd collect these stamps in books, and once you had enough, you could redeem them for merchandise. The competition between gas station chains was fierce. They'd advertise how many stamps you'd get per gallon, sometimes offering double stamp days to attract customers. Families chose their gas stations based entirely on which stamps they collected. Kids would sit in the back seat, carefully organizing stamps in books while parents pumped gas. The system created brand loyalty unlike anything we see today. You didn't just buy gas. You invested in a relationship with a company. Then credit card rewards programs arrived in the 1980s. Every morning before sunrise, a 12-year-old boy rode his bicycle through sleeping neighborhoods, throwing rolled newspapers onto front porches. This was the paper boy, and this was often a kid's first job in 1950s America. He'd wake up at 5 a.m., pick up his stack of papers from the distribution point, fold each one carefully, stuff them in his canvas bag, and pedal his route in the dark. Rain, snow, summer heat. The papers had to be delivered. On collection day, he'd knock on doors in the evening, asking subscribers to pay their weekly fee. He'd keep a percentage as his earnings. Being a paper boy taught responsibility, money management, and work ethic. It taught you to wake up when you didn't want to to work when it was uncomfortable, to interact with adults professionally. By the 1990s, paperboys mostly disappeared. Newspapers switched to adult carriers driving cars. Television didn't run 24 hours a day in the 1950s. At midnight, sometimes earlier, the station would play the national anthem, show an American flag waving, and then shut down for the night. What came next was the test pattern, a geometric graphic with circles, lines, and the station's call letters, accompanied by a steady tone. That test pattern would stay on your screen until the station came back on the air at 6 a.m. If you fell asleep with the TV on, you'd wake up to that tone buzzing through your house. The test pattern wasn't entertainment. It was a signal. Programming is over. Go to bed. There was no late-night television, no infomercials, no 24-hour news. Television had boundaries. It had a schedule. And when the day ended, television ended too. That concept is completely foreign now. Your television in the 1950s was a massive piece of furniture. A wooden console that weighed 200 pounds, with a small black and white screen, maybe 12 inches diagonally, tucked inside. The picture was grainy, fuzzy, and required constant adjustment of the rabbit ear antennas. But that wasn't even the strangest part. The strangest part was that television simply stopped every night. Around midnight, the station would broadcast the national anthem. The screen would show an American flag waving against a black background. Then a voice would say, "This concludes our broadcast day," and the screen would go dark, completely dark. No programming, no reruns, no overnight movies. Television shut down like a store closing. If you wanted entertainment after midnight, you read a book or went to bed. This idea that media had operating hours shaped how Americans thought about leisure time. We're 15 items in, and you're starting to see the pattern. S&H green stamps turned shopping into a treasure hunt. Trading stamps made you loyal to one gas station for life. Paperboys learned responsibility before dawn. Test patterns told you when entertainment ended, and televisions signed off at midnight because content had limits. Nothing was endless. Nothing was always available. Turn on a television in the 1950s and nothing happened. Not immediately. You'd flip the switch and wait. The screen stayed black for 30 seconds, sometimes a full minute, while the vacuum tubes inside heated up. You'd hear a faint humming sound as electricity flowed through the circuits. Then a tiny dot of light would appear in the center of the screen, slowly expanding until the picture materialized. These vacuum tubes were fragile glass cylinders filled with gas, and they generated enormous heat. The back of your TV was vented with slots to let hot air escape. Touch the cabinet after an hour of watching, and it'd be warm. Vacuum tubes burned out regularly like light bulbs. When your picture went fuzzy or disappeared, you'd pull the back panel off, remove all the tubes, take them to the drugstore, and use the tube tester machine to figure out which one was dead. Getting a clear picture on your 1950s, television required constant adjustment. The rabbit ear antennas, two telescoping metal rods sticking up from the top of the TV, had to be positioned exactly right. You'd extend them to different lengths, angle them in different directions, and sometimes wrap them in aluminum foil to boost signal strength. One person would stand at the TV, slowly rotating the antennas, while another person sat on the couch, shouting instructions, "There! No! Back a little! You had it!" The picture would go from snowy static to clear, then back to static with the slightest movement. If a car drove past your house, the picture would flutter. If someone walked between the TV and the antenna, everything went fuzzy. And forget about all 3 channels coming in clearly. You'd get great reception on CBS, terrible on NBC, Swanson introduced the TV dinner in 1953, and it changed American eating forever. The concept was revolutionary, a complete meal in a compartmentalized aluminum tray, frozen and ready to heat. Salisbury steak in the large compartment, mashed potatoes in one small section, corn in another, and apple cobbler in the corner. You'd preheat the oven to 425 degrees, slide the tray in, still covered with foil, and wait 25 minutes. The whole house would fill with the smell of processed meat and overcooked vegetables. When it came out, you'd peel back the foil carefully, steam would blast your face, and eat directly from the tray, usually on a TV tray table in the living room, while watching Gunsmoke or I Love Lucy. TV dinners weren't gourmet, they were convenience. They meant mothers didn't have to cook every single night. They meant families could eat while watching television, something previously considered rude. Heating your home in the 1950s was a daily chore. Most houses had coal furnaces in the basement, massive cast-iron monsters that required constant feeding. Every morning and evening someone had to go down to the basement, open the furnace door, shovel in coal, and adjust the vents to control the burn rate. The coal sat in a separate room or outdoor bin, delivered by truck and dumped through a chute. You'd shovel it into buckets and carry it to the furnace. The work was dirty, physical, and non-negotiable. Let the fire die, and your house went cold. The furnace produced clinkers, hard chunks of ash and unburned coal that had to be removed regularly. You'd shake down the grates, let the clinkers fall into the ash pit, shovel them out, and dispose of them. Your hands were always black. Your basement was always dusty. Doing laundry in the 1950s was dangerous. The wringer washer, a machine with 2 rotating rubber rollers mounted on top, could catch your hand and pull your entire arm through if you weren't careful. Here's how it worked. You'd fill the tub with hot water and soap powder, agitate the clothes for 10 minutes, then feed each piece through the wringer rollers to squeeze out the water. The rollers pressed together with tremendous force, flattening clothes as they passed through. You had to feed items carefully, flat, smoothed out, no bunching, or the machine would jam. Women lost fingers. They broke arms. Children were warned to never go near the wringer when it was running. After wringing, you'd transfer clothes to a second tub for rinsing, then wring them again. Everything was manual. Everything took hours, and everything carried risk. When automatic washers arrived in the early 1960s, wringer washers disappeared almost overnight. 20 things gone. Vacuum tubes that took forever to warm up. Rabbit ears wrapped in foil just to watch one channel clearly. TV dinners in aluminum trays that burned your fingers. Coal furnaces that demanded daily labor. Wringer washers that could snap your arm like a twig. Every convenience we take for granted today? Someone in the 1950s worked for it. Before electric refrigerators became standard, American homes had iceboxes. These were insulated wooden cabinets lined with zinc or porcelain, with a large compartment at the top for a block of ice. The iceman delivered blocks weighing 25, 50, or 100 pounds, and carrying them with giant tongs over his shoulder. He'd place the ice in the top compartment, and the cold air would sink down, keeping your food cool in the lower section. But the ice melted. Every day, you'd have to empty the drip pan underneath the icebox, sometimes twice a day in summer. The ice block lasted 3 to 5 days, depending on weather and how often you opened the door. You couldn't store much: milk, butter, eggs, maybe some leftover meat. Nothing stayed truly cold. Food spoiled constantly. By the mid-1950s, electric refrigerators had mostly replaced iceboxes, but rural areas still used them into the 1960s. Friday nights in the 1950s meant sock hops. Schools would roll back the bleachers in the gymnasium, set up a record player, and host dances where students danced in their socks. No shoes allowed to protect the gymnasium floor. Girls wore poodle skirts that twirled when they spun. Boys wore jeans rolled at the cuffs and white T-shirts with the sleeves rolled up. A teacher would serve as DJ, playing 45 RPM records: Elvis, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Buddy Holly. The music was loud, the lights were dim, and chaperones patrolled the edges to make sure nobody danced too close. Slow songs meant couples swayed together, barely moving. Fast songs meant the jitterbug, the twist, the bop. Sock hops were supervised freedom, a place where teenagers could socialize outside their homes but still under adult watch. They were affordable entertainment. Admission cost 50 cents. By the 1970s, sock hops disappeared as school dances moved to cafeterias. Pull into a drive-in restaurant in the 1950s, and a car hop on roller skates would glide up to your car window. She'd be wearing a uniform, usually a short skirt, fitted top, and a paper hat, and carrying a notepad. You'd order directly from your car: burgers, fries, malts, and root beer floats. She'd skate back to the kitchen, clip your order to the carousel, and when your food was ready, she'd load it onto a tray and skate back out. The tray hooked onto your car door window, creating a makeshift table. You'd eat in your car, listening to the radio, watching other cars come and go. When you finished, you'd blink your headlights, and she'd skate over to collect the tray and payment. Car hops made tips. Good ones could earn serious money on busy weekend nights. Then fast food chains like McDonald's eliminated table service entirely. The malt shop was teenage headquarters in 1950s America. After school, kids would crowd into red vinyl booths, order malts and phosphates, and stay for hours. The jukebox played continuously. Drop in a dime, pick 3 songs, conversations about homework, football games, who was dating whom filled the air. The malts were made the old-fashioned way: ice cream, malt powder, milk, and flavored syrup blended until thick. You'd sip them through paper straws that got soggy before you finished. The shop owner tolerated teenagers taking up booths for hours because they created atmosphere. Parents knew their kids were safe there. It was supervised socialization. The owner kept watch, broke up arguments, sent kids home if they got rowdy. Malt shops weren't just restaurants. They were community centers. Then suburban sprawl and shopping malls scattered that concentrated teenage culture. Every diner, malt shop, and restaurant in the 1950s had a jukebox. These weren't digital machines. These were mechanical wonders, glass and chrome cabinets filled with 45 RPM records, illuminated with colored lights. You'd walk up, flip through the song selections printed on cards, drop in a dime, and press the buttons. Look at what's vanished in just 25 items. Ice boxes that required daily ice delivery. Sock hops where teenagers danced in their socks. Car hops on roller skates bringing burgers to your car. Malt shops where kids spent entire afternoons on one milkshake. Jukeboxes that played music everyone had to hear together. These weren't just things. This was a completely different way of living. The poodle skirt defined 1950s teenage fashion. These were circle skirts made of felt, usually in bright colors: pink, turquoise, red, with applique designs sewn or glued on. The most iconic design was the poodle, but girls also wore skirts decorated with records, dice, telephones, or flowers. The skirts were cut in a full circle, so when you twirled, they'd flare out dramatically. Girls wore them with tight sweaters, bobby socks, and saddle shoes. Walk through any high school in 1950s, America and every girl wore the same shoes, saddle shoes. These were Oxford-style shoes, usually white leather, with a black or brown leather saddle across the middle. Girls wore them with white bobby socks, ankle socks folded over once at the top. This wasn't a fashion choice. This was the uniform. You either wore saddle shoes or you were an outsider. In 1958, America went insane for a plastic tube bent into a circle. The hula hoop exploded onto the market in July, and within 4 months, 25 million had sold. Kids, teenagers, and adults stood in their yards, gyrating their hips to keep the hoop spinning around their waists. Stores couldn't keep them in stock. Factories ran 24 hours a day trying to meet demand. The hoops cost $1.98 and came in bright colors. Every school kid in the 1950s carried a metal lunchbox. These weren't generic containers. They were stamped with licensed characters: Roy Rogers, Hopalong Cassidy, Superman, Davy Crockett, and came with matching thermoses that fit inside. The lunchboxes were heavy-duty steel with lithographed images built to withstand daily abuse from elementary school boys. You'd pack your lunch in the morning, a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, an apple, maybe some cookies, and a thermos filled with milk or Kool-Aid. Every office, every home, every writer in 1950s, America used a typewriter. The manual typewriter was a precision mechanical device. You'd press a key, a metal arm with the letter stamped on it would swing up and strike an ink ribbon against paper, leaving the imprint. Type fast enough and the arms would jam together, forcing you to stop and manually separate them. At the end of each line, you'd slam the carriage return lever, sending the carriage sliding back to the left with a satisfying ding. Professional typists could type 70 words per minute on these machines, their fingers flying across keys with rhythmic precision. Make a mistake? You'd use correction fluid or carbon paper correctors. Typing required skill, focus, and training. High schools taught typing classes specifically for these machines. Then computers arrived. Word processors made mistakes erasable. If you needed a copy of something you typed in the 1950s, you used carbon paper. This was thin, dark blue or black paper coated with carbon ink. You'd sandwich it between 2 sheets of regular paper, carbon side down against the bottom sheet, load them into your typewriter, and type. The pressure from the typewriter keys would transfer ink from the carbon paper onto the bottom sheet, creating a duplicate. Secretaries would stack up to 5 sheets with carbon paper between each one, creating multiple copies simultaneously. The copies got progressively lighter. The 5th copy was barely readable. Your fingers turned black from handling carbon paper. The carbon smudged easily, ruining documents. Make a typing error? Writing in the 1950s meant filling your fountain pen every few days. These weren't disposable pens. These were permanent instruments with gold nibs and internal reservoirs. To fill them, you'd unscrew the barrel, expose the rubber ink sac or piston mechanism, dip the nib into a bottle of liquid ink, and squeeze or twist to draw ink up into the reservoir. Fountain pens required maintenance, and the nibs had to be cleaned regularly or they'd clog. The ink flow had to be just right. Too much and you'd blob, too little and the writing would skip. Your handwriting looked different depending on pressure and angle. Fountain pens leaked. They stained pockets, ruined shirts, left ink smudges on hands and papers, but they were the standard writing instrument. Schools taught penmanship specifically for fountain pens. Then ballpoint pens arrived, cheap, reliable, disposable. Fountain pens became luxury items instead of daily tools. Because fountain pens used liquid ink, you couldn't just write and close the page. The ink stayed wet for 10, 20, sometimes 30 seconds. Close a book too soon and you'd smear everything. That's where blotting paper came in. Every desk had a blotter, a sheet of thick, unabsorbent paper, and you'd gently press it against your freshly written words to absorb excess ink and speed drying. School desks had blotter pads built into them. Offices had large desk blotters that covered the entire writing surface. You'd write a sentence, blot it, write another sentence, blot it. The process slowed everything down. It made writing deliberate. Blotting paper came in different grades. Some absorbed too much and pulled ink off the page. Others barely absorbed at all. When ballpoint pens took over in the 1960s, blotting paper vanished. Ink dried instantly. The era of patience in writing ended. Student desks in 1950s, classrooms had small circular holes in the upper right corner, inkwells. These held small glass or ceramic bottles filled with liquid ink. Students would dip their fountain pens into these wells throughout the day. The teacher or a designated student would fill the inkwells every morning from a large bottle. Inevitably, kids would spill them. Ink would pour across desks, drip onto floors, stain clothes. Some kids would stick their fingers in the inkwells, flick ink at classmates, or drop things into them to watch the ink splash. Boys would dip girls' braids in the inkwells as pranks. The inkwells were constant maintenance headaches for teachers. By the early 1960s, as ballpoint pens became cheap and reliable, schools stopped filling inkwells. The holes remained in old desks for decades, empty reminders of how students once wrote. Every classroom in 1950s, America had floor-to-ceiling slate chalkboards covering the front wall, real slate, quarried from mountains and cut into huge panels mounted on the walls. Teachers wrote with thick sticks of chalk that created clouds of dust with every stroke. The chalk dust settled on everything: desks, floors, teachers' clothes. By the end of the day, teachers' hands were white with residue. Students were assigned as blackboard monitors, responsible for clapping erasers outside to knock out the chalk dust. Baking in the 1950s started with sifting flour. Every kitchen had a hand-crank flour sifter, a metal canister with a mesh screen and a mechanical crank on the side. You'd measure flour into the top, turn the crank, and the flour would be pushed through the mesh screen into your mixing bowl. This process broke up lumps, added air, and created lighter, fluffier baked goods. Sifting was non-negotiable. Every recipe started with sift flour 3 times. Your grandmother would stand at the counter, cranking that handle, watching flour snow down into her bowl. The sifter would get gummed up with oil residue and have to be washed carefully. Some sifters had multiple screens for extra fine results. The hand crank sifter was a workout. Make a 3-layer cake, and you'd sift 2 pounds of flour. When pre-sifted flour appeared in stores in the 1970s, hand crank sifters disappeared. Making coffee in the 1950s was a morning ritual. The percolator sat on the stove, a tall metal pot with a glass knob on top. You'd fill the bottom with cold water, place a metal stem with a basket on top, fill the basket with ground coffee, and turn on the heat. As the water boiled, it would bubble up through the stem, spray over the coffee grounds, and drip back down, repeating this cycle. You'd watch the glass knob. When the coffee inside turned dark brown and bubbled vigorously, it was ready. The process took 10 to 15 minutes. The percolator made distinct perking sounds, glub, 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 that became the soundtrack to morning. The smell filled the entire house, waking everyone up. The coffee was strong, slightly bitter, and scalding hot. Percolators made coffee taste different than modern drip machines. The repeated boiling extracted more oils and created richer flavor. When automatic drip coffee makers arrived in the 1970s, percolators disappeared. Rehook 40 items down, and we're seeing the pattern clearly now. Slate chalkboards that covered you in dust, flour sifters that took 5 minutes of cranking, rotary egg beaters that built forearm strength, manual meat grinders where you knew exactly what you were eating, percolators that took 15 minutes to brew coffee. The 1950s didn't automate anything. Every result required physical effort. Every meal, every task, every daily action demanded time and muscle. Egg coddlers were porcelain or ceramic cups with screw-on lids designed to cook eggs gently. You'd butter the inside of the coddler, crack an egg into it, add a pinch of salt and pepper, screw on the lid, and place the coddler in simmering water for 8 to 10 minutes. The result was a perfectly cooked soft egg with creamy yolk and tender whites. No rubbery texture, no overcooked edges. Egg coddlers came in sets, often given as wedding gifts. Some were decorative, hand-painted with flowers or patterns. Making breakfast with egg coddlers took longer than frying or scrambling, but the results were considered more refined, more elegant. British and American households used them regularly for breakfast in bed or Sunday brunch. By the 1970s, egg coddlers disappeared as cooking became faster-paced. Microwave eggs replaced them. The careful, gentle cooking method vanished in favor of speed. Open any 1950s kitchen cupboard, and you'd find Jell-O molds, copper, aluminum, or tin molds in elaborate shapes, fish, rabbits, castles, flowers, geometric designs. Making Jell-O salad was standard for every potluck, holiday dinner, and church social. You'd dissolve flavored gelatin in hot water, add cold water or fruit juice, pour it into the mold, add ingredients. Canned fruit cocktail, shredded carrots, miniature marshmallows, sometimes shrimp or vegetables, and refrigerate overnight. The next day, you dip the mold briefly in warm water and invert it onto a plate. If you did it right, the Jell-O would slide out perfectly, maintaining its decorative shape. If you did it wrong, it collapsed into a lumpy pile. Jell-O molds were cooking showpieces, proof of homemaking skill. The recipes were bizarre by modern standards. Lime Jell-O with cabbage, tomato aspic with vegetables. By the 1980s, Jell-O salads disappeared from American tables. Making butter at home was common in rural America through the 1950s. After churning cream into butter, you'd pack the soft butter into wooden molds carved with decorative designs, flowers, cows, wheat sheaves. Press firmly, scrape off the excess, chill it, then pop it out. The molded butter would have a beautiful imprinted design on top. Butter molds came in individual serving sizes or large pound blocks. Some families had molds passed down through generations, the wood smooth and darkened from decades of use. The molds had to be soaked in cold water before use, so the butter wouldn't stick. Farm wives took pride in their butter presentation. At church suppers or community dinners, you'd see rows of butter portions, each stamped with different family molds. Store-bought butter in waxed paper replaced homemade butter for most Americans by the 1960s. Butter molds became antiques, their practical purpose extinct. Making ice cream in the 1950s was a family project. The hand-crank ice cream maker sat on the back porch, a wooden bucket with a metal canister inside. You'd pour the ice cream mixture into the canister, pack ice and rock salt around it, and start cranking. One person would crank the handle while others held the bucket steady. The crank turned the canister inside the ice, freezing the mixture gradually. It took 30 to 45 minutes of continuous cranking. Your arm would ache. Kids would take turns, 5 minutes each, passing the handle when they got tired. As the ice cream froze, the cranking got harder. Thicker resistance meant the ice cream was almost ready. When you finally stopped and lifted out the paddle, everyone would fight over licking it clean. The homemade ice cream was smoother, richer, and better than anything from stores. Then electric ice cream makers arrived, eliminating the manual labor. Pull into a gas station in the 1950s, and you never left your car. A uniformed attendant would run out immediately, asking, "Fill her up?" You'd say yes, and he'd pump your gas, wash your windshield, check your oil, check your tire pressure, and check your radiator fluid, all while you sat comfortably inside. This was standard service, not premium. Every gas station worked this way. The attendants wore matching uniforms with the station brand embroidered on the shirt: Texaco, Esso, Shell, Sinclair. They had grease rags hanging from their pockets, and they knew cars. They'd notice if your tires looked low or your oil was dark. They'd top off fluids for free. You'd pay cash through the car window. Full service wasn't an upcharge. It was the only option. Self-service gas pumps didn't exist. Oregon and New Jersey still prohibit self-service today, preserving this tiny slice of 1950s car culture. Before motel chains, American highways were lined with tourist cabins, small individual cottages arranged in rows, each with its own entrance. Families traveling cross-country would stop for the night, rent a cabin for $3 or $4, and have a private space, tiny, rustic, but private. Each cabin had a bed, maybe a sink, sometimes a shared bathroom facility. The cabins were owned by local families who lived on the property. You'd check in at the owner's house, pay cash, and get a key to your cabin. The experience was personal. Owners would recommend local restaurants, warn you about road conditions ahead, and sometimes offer homemade breakfast in the morning. Tourist cabins were scattered along Route 66 and every major highway. Then Holiday Inn standardized the motel industry in the 1950s. Chain motels offered consistency, indoor corridors, and attached bathrooms. By the 1970s, most tourist cabin courts had closed or been demolished. The personal touch of roadside lodging vanished. Urgent news in the 1950s arrived via telegram. You'd call Western Union, dictate your message, and a telegram boy would deliver it within hours. The delivery boys were teenagers on bicycles wearing Western Union uniforms and caps. They'd pedal through neighborhoods with telegrams in their shoulder bags, knock on doors, and hand-deliver small yellow envelopes. Seeing a telegram boy at your door triggered immediate anxiety. Telegrams were expensive, so people only sent them for urgent matters: deaths, emergencies, major announcements. During wartime, telegram boys delivered casualty notifications. Families dreaded their arrival. The boys earned small wages plus tips. They were reliable, fast, and professional despite their young age. Telegrams were charged by the word, so messages were terse, abbreviated, stripped of unnecessary words. Arriving Boston Friday. Stop meet station, stop love John. When long-distance phone calls became affordable in the 1960s, telegrams declined. Western Union's telegram service ended completely in 2006. The yellow envelopes stopped coming. Rehook 50 items. Halfway there. Free glasses when you bought gas. Free maps to plan every trip. Burma shave signs that made highways entertaining. Tourist cabins where owners knew your name. Telegram boys pedaling through neighborhoods with urgent news. The first half of this list reveals something profound. The 1950s valued human connection over efficiency, service over speed, personal interaction over convenience, and we traded all of it away without realizing what we'd lose. Before Spotify, before iPods, before Walkmans, teenagers in the 1950s carried transistor radios. These were revolutionary. The first portable radios small enough to fit in your pocket, powered by a single 9-volt battery instead of plugged into walls. You'd walk down the street with your transistor radio pressed against your ear, listening to rock and roll stations your parents disapproved of. The sound quality was tinny, mono, and often filled with static. But it didn't matter. This was your music in your hand wherever you went. Transistor radios let teenagers create private sound bubbles before headphones existed. You'd take them to the beach, to the park, to your bedroom late at night under the covers. The radio became an extension of teenage identity. By the 1980s, the Walkman replaced transistor radios. Then iPods replaced Walkmans. Then smartphones replaced everything. But that first taste of portable personal music? That started with a transistor radio in 1954. As standard treat every soda fountain and diner in 1950s, America served root beer floats. The process was simple but perfect. The soda jerk would take a tall glass, add 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream, then slowly pour root beer over the top. The root beer would foam up dramatically, creating thick, creamy foam that spilled over the rim. You'd get a long spoon and a straw. Spoon for the ice cream, straw for the liquid. The first sip was pure foam, sweet and fizzy. As the ice cream melted into the root beer, the flavors blended into something magical. Creamy, sweet, slightly spicy from the root beer. Root beer floats weren't special occasion treats. They were standard, everyday indulgences. Kids ordered them after school. Families ordered them after dinner. The float was America's dessert drink. When soda fountains closed in the 1970s, root beer floats mostly vanished. Fast food restaurants don't make them. The culture of hand-mixed fountain drinks died completely. Every afternoon in summer, you'd hear it. Distant music, getting closer. The ice cream truck was coming. In the 1950s and 60s, ice cream trucks ran daily routes through residential neighborhoods like clockwork. 3 o'clock, the truck would turn onto your street, playing Turkey in the Straw or The Entertainer from tinny speakers. Kids would sprint from their yards, clutching nickels and dimes. The truck would stop, and the ice cream man would slide open the side window, revealing rows of frozen treats. Bomb pops, creamsicles, drumsticks, push-ups, fudgesicles, ice cream sandwiches. Everything cost 10 or 15 cents. The ice cream man knew the neighborhood kids by name, knew their favorites, sometimes extended credit. Pay me tomorrow. This was daily ritual, community routine. By the 1990s, most ice cream truck routes disappeared. Liability insurance became expensive. Neighborhoods grew skeptical of strangers approaching children. The daily ice cream truck vanished from American summer. Men in the 1950s never left home without hats. The fedora, a felt hat with a creased crown and snap brim, was standard business attire. You'd see seas of fedoras on city streets, in train stations, at baseball games. Men wore them commuting to work, wore them to church, wore them shopping downtown. The hat wasn't fashion statement, it was expected. Going bareheaded in public was considered improper, almost indecent. Men owned multiple hats, work hats, dress hats, casual hats. Hat etiquette was strict. Remove your hat indoors, tip your hat to ladies, never place a hat on a bed. Hat shops were common in every downtown. Then John F. Kennedy appeared bareheaded at his 1961 inauguration. The President of the United States, in formal attire, with no hat. That single image accelerated a trend that was already starting. By the mid-1960s, men stopped wearing hats daily. Hat shops closed. The fedora became costume piece instead of daily necessity. Women in the 1950s wore gloves everywhere, not just for warmth. Gloves were essential to proper dress. Going to church, shopping downtown, attending social events, even running errands required gloves. Short gloves for casual occasions, opera-length gloves for formal events, leather gloves for everyday wear. Women owned dozens of pairs in different colors to match outfits. Glove etiquette was complex. Keep them on when greeting people, remove them for eating, never gesture wildly while wearing them. Department stores had entire glove departments with saleswomen who'd measure your hands and help you select appropriate styles. Young women received gloves as graduation gifts. The gloves symbolized respectability, femininity, social status. Then fashion relaxed in the 1960s. Gloves became optional, then obsolete. By the 1970s, women only wore gloves for warmth in winter. The idea that bare hands in public were improper completely disappeared. Modern women find the concept bizarre. Rehook transistor radios were your only portable music. Root beer floats were everyday treats, not nostalgic recreations. Ice cream trucks came every single afternoon like clockwork. Men wore fedoras to leave the house. Women wore gloves to buy groceries. 5 more things completely erased. Your Sunday best hats were expensive investments in the 1950s, so proper storage mattered. Hat boxes, cylindrical cardboard boxes with lids, protected hats from dust, crushing, and damage. Women's hat boxes were decorative, often covered in floral paper or fabric, stacked in closets or under beds. Men's hat boxes were simpler but equally essential. Traveling with hats meant packing them carefully in hat boxes, never cramming them into suitcases. Trains had special overhead racks designed specifically for hat boxes. Department stores provided complimentary hat boxes with purchases, sturdy boxes with the store's name printed on the side, status symbols in themselves. Closets in older homes often have high shelves built specifically for hat box storage. When daily hat wearing ended in the 1960s, hat boxes disappeared. Modern people see them in vintage stores and don't even recognize their purpose. The infrastructure of hat culture, boxes, racks, closet shelves, outlived the hats themselves by decades. Protecting your good shoes in 1950s rainy weather meant wearing galoshes, rubber overshoes that stretched over your regular shoes. These weren't rain boots. These were protective covers. You'd buckle them over your dress shoes before leaving the house, walk through puddles and mud, then remove them when you arrived at your destination. Men wore black rubber galoshes over their leather dress shoes. Women wore galoshes over their heels and flats. Everyone kept galoshes by the door during wet seasons. Schools had galosh racks, where students would line up their rubber footwear. The galoshes were awkward, unfashionable, and absolutely necessary. Leather shoes were expensive, and getting them wet ruined them. Some galoshes had metal buckles that clicked satisfyingly when fastened. By the 1970s, galoshes disappeared. Waterproof shoe sprays, synthetic materials, and the decline of formal shoe culture made them obsolete. People started wearing sneakers in rain instead. When wet winter coats in the 1950s were made from wool, heavy, thick wool that kept you genuinely warm but absorbed water like a sponge. Get caught in snow or rain wearing your wool coat and it would double in weight. The coat would sag on your shoulders, drip water on floors, and take days to dry completely. Wet wool smelled distinctly musty, a smell everyone recognized instantly. You'd hang the coat near a radiator or furnace, waiting for it to dry, rotating it periodically. The wool was scratchy against skin, so women wore silk scarves around their necks as barriers. Men's wool overcoats were even heavier, 10 or 15 pounds dry, 25 pounds wet. These coats lasted decades if cared for properly. Dry cleaning was expensive, so people brushed them regularly and spot cleaned when necessary. When synthetic fabrics like polyester and Gore-Tex appeared in the 1970s, wool coats mostly disappeared. Lightweight, water-resistant materials replaced them. Cutting grass in the 1950s meant pushing a manual reel mower, a mechanical device with spiral blades that spun as you pushed, cutting grass with a scissor-like action. No engine, no gasoline, no electricity, just your muscles and a well-sharpened blade. Push a manual mower across a typical suburban lawn, and you'd work up a serious sweat. The mowers were heavy, required consistent forward momentum to work properly, and demanded multiple passes over the same area for even cutting. You'd hear them on Saturday mornings throughout neighborhoods. The distinctive whirring sound of spinning blades, the rhythmic pattern of overlapping passes. Manual mowers couldn't handle tall grass or weeds, let your lawn grow too high, and the mower would just push the grass down instead of cutting it. Gasoline-powered rotary mowers appeared in the 1950s, but didn't become standard until the 1960s. Manual mowers disappeared almost overnight once powered mowers became affordable. Every household in 1950s, America had a substantial toolbox, heavy steel construction, multiple trays filled with quality tools, not cheap tools, real tools, forged wrenches, hardened screwdrivers, files, hammers, saws, all purchased to last a lifetime. Men fixed things. Broken toaster? Fix it. Leaky faucet? Fix it. Torn screen? Fix it. Calling a repairman was expensive and often unnecessary. Fathers taught sons how to use tools, how to diagnose problems, how to make repairs. The toolbox passed from generation to generation. Products were designed to be repairable. Screws instead of glue. Replaceable parts. Simple mechanisms. Instruction manuals included repair diagrams. Hardware stores sold individual replacement parts. When something broke, your first instinct was repair, not replace. That culture died in the 1980s when disposable products became cheaper than repair. Electronics became sealed units. Appliances became throwaway items. The heavy steel toolbox gathered dust. Fix-it culture vanished from American life. Hat boxes to protect your expensive hats. Galoshes stretched over good shoes every rainy day. Wool coats that soaked up water and took 3 days to dry. Manual push mowers that turned lawn care into a full workout. Heavy toolboxes filled with quality tools because you fixed everything yourself. Every neighborhood in 1950s, America had its barbershop, a small storefront with a striped pole outside, 2 or 3 chairs inside, and the same barber who'd been cutting hair there for 20 years. Walk in on Saturday morning and you'd wait your turn on a bench along the wall, reading magazines, listening to men discuss baseball and politics. The barber knew everyone by name, knew how they liked their haircut, and never needed instructions. Haircuts cost $2, shaves cost $1. The barber used straight razors, sharpened on leather strops hanging by the chair. He'd lather your face with a brush and hot shaving cream, then shave you smooth with 3 or 4 expert strokes. The shop smelled of bay rum, aftershave, and talcum powder. After your haircut, the barber would dust your neck with powder and hold up a mirror so you could check the back. Then chain barbershops appeared, supercuts, great clips, with cheaper prices and faster service. When someone got sick in the 1950s, the doctor came to you, your family doctor. The same physician who delivered your babies and treated your childhood illnesses would drive to your house or climb the stairs to the bedroom and examine the patient. He carried a black leather bag filled with instruments: stethoscope, thermometer, tongue depressors, bandages, and medications. He'd listen to your lungs, check your throat, feel your glands, and usually prescribe something right there. Sometimes he'd give injections on the spot. The doctor knew your family's medical history intimately because he'd treated multiple generations. He'd stop by the next day to check on you, never charging extra for follow-up visits. House calls were standard medical care, not luxury service. Then insurance companies changed reimbursement structures in the 1960s, making house calls unprofitable. Doctors stopped coming. Patients started going to offices. The black bag disappeared from American medicine. Personal care became assembly line appointments. Every store in the 1950s had a mechanical cash register, a massive machine of brass, steel, and glass, sitting prominently on the counter. When the clerk rang up your purchase, they'd punch numbered keys on the front. Each key press required significant force. The register would mechanically calculate the total, then the clerk would pull a large handle on the side. The register would go ka-ching, a loud, satisfying mechanical sound, and the cash drawer would spring open. The purchase amount would pop up in the display window on top, visible to both clerk and customer. Inside the drawer, spring-loaded clips held paper money in place. The registers were works of mechanical art. Weighing 50 to 100 pounds, they required regular maintenance, oiling, adjusting, cleaning. When electronic registers appeared in the 1970s, they were silent, plastic, and boring. The ka-ching sound disappeared. That auditory confirmation of commerce, the sound of American retail, ended forever. Banking in the 1950s meant your passbook, a small booklet where the bank recorded every deposit and withdrawal by hand. When you deposited money, the teller would write the amount in your passbook, stamp it with the date, and hand it back. Your passbook was your only record of account activity. You'd bring it every time you went to the bank. Lose your passbook, and you had serious problems. The bank could replace it, but the process took time. Parents would give children passbooks for their savings accounts, teaching them to watch their balance grow, seeing the numbers written in ink, watching deposits accumulate, and made saving tangible and real. Passbooks created physical connection to money. Then ATMs arrived in the 1980s. Online banking followed. Paper statements replaced passbooks. Now banking is invisible, happening in apps and screens. The physical evidence of your financial life vanished. Money became abstract. If you couldn't afford something in the 1950s, you didn't use credit cards, you used layaway. Here's how it worked. You'd select an item, a coat, a toy, furniture, and the store would hold it in the back room. You'd make a down payment, usually 10 or 20%, and sign an agreement. Every week or two, you'd return to the store and make another payment. The store would mark your payment in their ledger and give you a receipt. After months of payments, once you'd paid the full price, they'd release the item to you. Layaway taught delayed gratification. You had to wait, save, and plan. Department stores had entire layaway departments with rows of tagged items waiting for customers to finish paying. Christmas shopping started in summer because layaway took months. When credit cards became widespread in the 1970s, layaway mostly disappeared. Instant gratification replaced patience. Debt replaced saving. Your neighborhood barber knew your name and your haircut. Doctors came to your house with black bags. Cash registers were mechanical symphonies that went ka-ching. Banks gave you passbooks where deposits were written in ink. Stores held items you couldn't afford yet in layaway departments until you'd saved enough. Shopping downtown at department stores in the 1950s was a social event, and stores encouraged you to stay all day. Many had tea rooms or coffee shops inside where you could take breaks between departments. But even better, some stores had coffee stations scattered throughout. A small table with a silver coffee service where you could pour yourself a cup while deciding between dresses or comparing furniture. Sales clerks were attentive without being pushy. They'd bring items to fitting rooms for you, offer suggestions, and remember your preferences for your next visit. The stores provided comfortable chairs near fitting rooms where husbands could wait while wives tried on clothes. Shopping wasn't rushed. It was leisure activity. You'd spend an entire afternoon in one store, maybe purchase one or two items, and the staff treated you like valued guests. When discount chains and big box stores appeared in the 1970s, this service culture disappeared. Shopping became transactional. Get in, find it yourself, check out, leave. Drying clothes in the 1950s meant hanging them outside on clotheslines. Every backyard had lines. Rope or wire stretched between posts, sometimes on pulleys. You'd stand at your back door with a basket of wet laundry, clip each piece to the line with wooden clothespins, and hang everything to dry in the sun. Sheets, towels, shirts, pants, undergarments, all displayed for the neighborhood to see. Clothesline arrangement was an art form. Housewives had systems, whites in direct sun for bleaching, colors in shade to prevent fading. Heavy items on the outside lines, delicates protected in the middle. The clothes would dry crisp and stiff, smelling of fresh air and sunshine. You'd unpin them hours later, fold them into the basket, and bring them inside. Rain meant racing outside to grab everything before it got soaked. When automatic clothes dryers became affordable in the 1960s, outdoor clotheslines mostly disappeared. That sunshine smell vanished from American laundry forever. Clotheslines created neighborhood rhythms. Monday was laundry day. Every house on the block would have lines full of wet clothes by mid-morning. Walking through neighborhoods, you'd see rows of sheets flapping like sails, creating temporary walls between yards. Children would run between hanging laundry, playing hide-and-seek behind their mother's work. The clotheslines revealed intimate details about families, the sizes of their clothes, how many children they had, their prosperity or poverty visible in fabric quality. Neighbors would judge each other's housekeeping by their laundry. Whites should be bright, items should be evenly spaced. Everything should be hung before 10 a.m. Leaving laundry on the line overnight was considered slovenly. Birds would sometimes leave droppings on clean laundry. Dust from passing cars would settle on damp clothes, but electric dryers used expensive electricity. Hanging laundry was free. When dryers became standard in the 1970s, the neighborhood clothesline culture vanished. Laundry became private, hidden inside machines. Standard houses built in the 1950s typically had one bathroom, one for an entire family. Parents, 3 or 4 kids, sometimes a grandparent. Everyone shared one toilet, one sink, one bathtub. Morning routines required military precision and cooperation. Father showered first because he had to get to work, then mother, then children in age order. Teenagers would pound on the door, yelling at siblings to hurry up. Saturday night was bath night. Everyone bathed once per week, whether they needed it or not. The bathroom schedule was sacred. You learned to be efficient, to not waste water, to respect others' time. Privacy was minimal. Everyone knew everyone else's bathroom habits. The medicine cabinet held one family's worth of supplies, one tube of toothpaste, one bottle of shampoo, one bar of soap. Then houses started including 2, 3, even 4 bathrooms. Master suites with private baths became standard. The shared single bathroom vanished from American architecture. School children in the 1950s regularly practiced nuclear attack drills. When the alarm sounded, you'd immediately drop to the floor, crawl under your desk, tuck your head between your knees, and cover your neck with your hand. Duck and cover. Teachers drilled this procedure weekly. Some schools had basement shelters stocked with crackers and water. The Civil Defense Department produced films shown in classrooms, cartoon turtles demonstrating how to protect yourself from atomic bombs. Children genuinely believed their desks would save them from nuclear explosions. The drills created generation-wide anxiety. Kids had nightmares about mushroom clouds. Families built backyard fallout shelters, stocking them with canned food and supplies. The constant threat of nuclear annihilation shaped childhood psychology. Air raid sirens were tested regularly. Their wailing sound meant danger. When the Cold War ended in the early 1990s, duck and cover drills stopped. The sirens fell silent. An entire generation's nuclear anxiety simply ended. Modern students have active shooter drills instead. Department stores served you coffee while you browsed. Laundry hung outside every Monday, announcing your housekeeping skills to the neighborhood. Entire families shared one bathroom and made it work. Elementary school children hid under wooden desks, believing it would protect them from nuclear weapons. The 1950s were strange. Walk through any American city in the 1950s and 60s, and you'd see them. Yellow and black fallout shelter signs marking basement locations where citizens should go during nuclear attack. Schools, office buildings, churches, subway stations, thousands of buildings were designated as official fallout shelters. The government stocked these locations with emergency supplies, crackers, water drums, medical kits, radiation detectors, sanitation supplies. Families received pamphlets explaining how long to stay sheltered after nuclear blast, 2 weeks minimum. Some people built private backyard shelters, burying steel or concrete boxes in their yards, outfitting them with bed, food, and entertainment. Neighbors debated whether they'd let others into their private shelters or shoot them to preserve resources for their own families. This was serious public discussion. The fallout shelter signs remained on buildings for decades after the Cold War ended. Many are still visible today, faded reminders of genuine nuclear fear. Modern people see them and don't understand the terror that justified them. No church potluck, family reunion, or neighborhood gathering in the 1950s was complete without Jell-O salads. These weren't desserts. They were side dishes. Lime Jell-O with shredded carrots and cabbage, orange Jell-O with cottage cheese and mandarin oranges, lemon Jell-O with tuna and peas. The combinations were bizarre, sometimes disgusting, but they were standard fare. Women competed to create the most elaborate Jell-O mold, layered colors, suspended fruits, creative shapes. Recipe magazines dedicated entire sections to Jell-O creations. The appeal was partly visual. Jell-O salads were colorful, eye-catching centerpieces, but mostly they were convenient. Cheap ingredients, made ahead, no refrigeration needed until serving. And Jell-O represented modernity, scientific food progress. By the 1980s, Jell-O salads disappeared from American tables. Younger generations found them horrifying. The savory Jell-O trend died completely. Modern potlucks have pasta salad instead. The era of congealed salads ended, taking an entire category of American cuisine with it. Dinner in many 1950s homes meant casseroles, one-dish meals assembled from shelf-stable ingredients and baked until bubbly. The formula was consistent: a starch, noodles, rice, or potatoes, a protein, usually canned meat like Spam or tuna, vegetables from cans, and a binder, cream of mushroom soup, topped with something crunchy, crushed crackers or French-fried onions. Mix everything in a baking dish, bake at 350 degrees for 45 minutes, and feed a family of 6 for under $2. Casseroles weren't gourmet. They were economical and efficient. Working mothers could assemble them in minutes. The same casserole would be eaten for dinner, then reheated for lunches the next day. Every church cookbook from the 1950s contains dozens of casserole recipes: tuna noodle casserole, green bean casserole, hamburger casserole, salmon casserole. When fresh food became more accessible and cooking culture shifted in the 1980s, casseroles became symbols of blandness. They disappeared from regular dinner rotations. Sunday in the 1950s had a rigid structure. Church in the morning, big family dinner in early afternoon. This wasn't optional. This was how Sundays worked. Mother would start cooking after church. Roast beef or chicken, mashed potatoes, vegetables, rolls, and pie for dessert. The meal took hours to prepare. The entire family gathered at the dining room table, parents, children, often grandparents or extended family. Conversation was expected. Father would carve the roast. Everyone would discuss their week, upcoming events, family matters. The meal lasted an hour or more. Children couldn't leave the table until excused. After dinner, dishes were washed by hand, dried, and put away. The rest of Sunday was rest, reading, quiet activities, no shopping because stores were closed. Sunday dinner was weekly family reunion, non-negotiable tradition. When stores started opening on Sundays in the 1970s and both parents began working, Sunday dinner culture collapsed. Families scattered, meals became casual. That weekly gathering vanished from American family life. Bread in the 1950s went stale within 2 days, so families made frequent trips to small neighborhood grocery stores, not supermarkets, small stores within walking distance where the owner knew everyone's names. You'd run to the store 3 or 4 times a week for bread, milk, eggs, whatever you needed immediately. The storekeeper would slice lunch meat to order, weigh produce, and add purchases to your account, settling up at the end of the week. Children were sent on these errands, trusted to walk alone, make purchases, and bring home the correct items. The store was community gathering spot. Neighbors would encounter each other, exchange news, discuss local events. Store owners extended credit to families going through hard times. They'd give candy to children. When supermarkets opened in the 1960s, they offered one-stop shopping, refrigerated storage that kept food fresh longer, and lower prices. The small neighborhood grocery stores couldn't compete. They closed one by one. That daily neighborhood interaction vanished with them. Fallout shelter signs marked where you'd hide from nuclear bombs. Jell-O salads with vegetables were side dishes, not desserts. Casseroles made from canned, everything fed families cheap. Sunday dinner gathered the entire family every single week without exception. Bread went stale in 2 days, so you walked to the neighborhood store every other day. In 1950s America, church-going wasn't a personal choice. It was social requirement. Families attended church every Sunday. Missing church meant you were sick, traveling, or something was seriously wrong. Your absence would be noticed, discussed, perhaps investigated by concerned neighbors. Church attendance was how communities measured respectability. Employers asked about church membership during job interviews. Neighborhoods were organized around churches. You knew families by which church they attended. Children went to Sunday school, then stayed for full service. Teenagers attended youth groups Wednesday nights. Churches organized social life, potlucks, picnics, bowling leagues, mission circles. Being unchurched was rare enough to mark you as an outsider. Then the 1960s brought cultural shifts. Church attendance became optional. By the 1970s, many people stopped attending regularly. By the 2000s, the religiously unaffiliated became America's fastest-growing group. That universal expectation of Sunday church attendance vanished within 2 generations. Empty church buildings now get converted to apartments and restaurants. Nobody locked their doors in 1950s suburban America. Front doors, back doors, car doors, all unlocked, all the time. You'd leave for work in the morning, door unlocked. Go shopping, door unlocked. Leave for vacation, maybe you'd lock it. Children came home from school and walked right in, no keys needed because there were no locked doors. Neighbors would walk into each other's homes unannounced, calling hello as they entered. This wasn't carelessness. This was trust. Crime rates were lower. Communities were smaller. Everyone knew everyone. Locking your door suggested you didn't trust your neighbors, which was insulting. Cars were left unlocked with keys in the ignition overnight. Bicycles were left in yards. Nothing got stolen because theft was rare and thieves were easily identified in tight-knit communities. This trust vanished in the 1970s. Crime rates rose, suburbs sprawled, communities became anonymous. People started locking doors. By the 1980s, home security systems became common. The era of unlocked doors ended forever. When families went on vacation in the 1950s, they'd leave house keys with neighbors. "We'll be gone 2 weeks. Could you water the plants and bring in the mail?" Neighbors had unrestricted access to your home. They'd walk in daily, check on things, make sure everything was fine. Nobody worried about theft or invasion of privacy. Neighbors were trusted as extended family. This arrangement was reciprocal. When they vacationed, you'd do the same for them. Emergency spare keys were hidden under doormats, in flower pots, above door frames. Locations so obvious they'd never work today. Children would be left in neighbors' care for hours without formal arrangement. "I'm running to town. Can you watch Jimmy?" "Sure. Send him over." No phone calls to confirm, no discussion. Just assumed mutual support. This neighborhood interdependence created social bonds that held communities together. When people stopped knowing their neighbors in the 1970s, this trust network dissolved. Now we hide spare keys in lockboxes with codes, trusting technology instead of people. Before air conditioning became standard, summer evenings meant sitting on front porches. Entire families would move outside after dinner, parents in rocking chairs or porch swings, children playing in the yard. This was how neighborhoods socialized. You'd see your neighbors on their porches. You'd call back and forth, exchange news, discuss the weather. People walking past would stop to chat. Front porches faced streets intentionally, designed for social interaction. The porch was semi-public space, transitioning between private home and public street. Teenagers would gather on porch steps. Children would play hide-and-seek, using porches as bases. You'd sit until dark, until the air cooled enough for sleeping. Then air conditioning changed everything. Families moved inside, shutting doors and windows. Front porch sitting ended. New houses were built with tiny decorative porches or none at all. Neighborhoods became silent. The casual social interaction that happened on front porches vanished. Communities became collections of isolated households instead of interconnected networks. Evenings in 1950s, neighborhoods meant large groups of children playing outside unsupervised. Kick the can was the favorite game, a combination of tag and hide-and-seek, using an empty can placed in the street. One person was it and guarded the can while others hid. The goal was to kick the can without being tagged. Games lasted hours, involving every kid on the block, ranging in age from 6 to 16. Nobody's parents watched. Children roamed the neighborhood freely, crossing multiple yards, hiding in bushes, running through gardens. Parents would occasionally yell from windows, "Don't go past the Johnson's house," but otherwise left kids alone. The game ended when streetlights came on, the universal signal to go home. This unsupervised outdoor play was normal, expected, considered healthy. By the 1990s, it had vanished entirely. Parenting culture shifted to constant supervision. Liability concerns kept kids off streets. Organized activities replaced free play. The sight of neighborhood children playing kick the can disappeared from American summer evenings. Everyone went to church every Sunday without question. Doors stayed unlocked 24/7 because you trusted your neighbors. Neighbors had keys to your house and would water your plants while you vacationed. Families sat on front porches every evening, talking to whoever walked past. Kids played kick the can in the streets until dark, with zero supervision. Children in the 1950s didn't wear watches. They didn't have cell phones. They had one way to know when to come home: Streetlight. Be home when the streetlights come on was the universal rule. You'd be playing 3 blocks away in someone's backyard, completely absorbed in games. And then you'd notice the streetlights were flickering on. Everyone would immediately start running toward home. Being late meant trouble. Parents didn't call you. They didn't text. They simply expected you to notice the streetlights and respond. This system required children to be aware of their surroundings, to pay attention, to be responsible for themselves. It also required parents to trust that their children would come home. The streetlight rule worked because communities were safe, because everyone followed the same rule, and because children were trained to obey it. When parents started calling children home individually in the 1980s, the streetlight system collapsed. Modern children stay out until parents text them, not until environmental cues tell them to return. Walk down any residential sidewalk in 1950s America, and you'd see hopscotch courts chalked on the concrete. Children drew them constantly, numbered squares in ascending order, usually to 10, with elaborate designs and variations. Every child knew how to play. Toss a stone, hop through the squares on one foot, skip the square with your stone, turn around, hop back, pick up your stone without losing balance. Hopscotch required nothing but chalk, a stone, and pavement. No equipment, no adult supervision, no organized structure. Children played for hours, creating variations and house rules. The chalk washed away with rain, so kids would redraw the courts the next day. Jump rope in the 1950s came with an entire oral tradition of rhymes and chants. Children would turn a long rope while 1 or 2 kids jumped in the middle, and everyone would chant together, "Miss Mary Mac, 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 all dressed in black, black, black." These chants had complex rhythms, matching the rope's rotation. Some were counting rhymes. You'd jump until you missed. Others told stories or included trick movements timed to specific words. Every playground had groups of girls jumping rope during recess, and the chants were passed down, not taught by adults. Older children taught younger ones, creating intergenerational cultural transmission. Regional variations existed. The same chant would have different versions in different cities. Boys occasionally jumped rope, too, though it was primarily girls' activity. Jump rope culture required no equipment except rope and knowledge. The chants were free, shared, public domain. When recess became shorter and more structured in the 1990s, jump rope faded. The oral tradition of chants mostly died. Modern children don't know them. Every school in 1950s America had marble tournaments during recess. Boys carried canvas bags of marbles, cat's eyes, boulders, Aggies, shooters, each with specific value. The game was played in a dirt circle drawn on the ground. Knee players would knuckle down and shoot marbles, trying to knock opponents' marbles out of the circle. Winners kept the marbles they knocked out. Some boys accumulated huge collections. Others lost everything in a single tournament. Trading marbles was serious business. Rare or beautiful marbles commanded high prices in the schoolyard economy. Some schools eventually banned marbles, considering them gambling. The game required skill, aiming, calculating angles, controlling force. Champion marble players had status. Then schoolyards were paved, eliminating the dirt circles needed for marbles. The game faded in the 1970s. By the 1980s, most children didn't know how to play. Marbles became collectibles instead of gaming pieces. The schoolyard tournaments ended, taking that competitive culture with them. Boys in the 1950s clipped baseball cards to their bicycle spokes using clothespins. The cards would flap against the spokes as the wheel rotated, creating a motorized sound, like a motorcycle or playing cards shuffling. The faster you pedaled, the louder the sound. Children would ride around making these sounds, feeling like they'd motorized their bicycles. Baseball cards were cheap, a nickel for a pack with bubble gum, so using them this way wasn't wasteful. They were meant to be enjoyed, traded, and used. The cards eventually got shredded by the spokes, destroyed completely. Those destroyed cards included Mickey Mantle rookies, Ted Williams, Jackie Robinson, cards now worth thousands of dollars. Nobody protected them in plastic sleeves. Nobody considered them investments. They were toys. When baseball cards became collectibles in the 1980s, that casual use ended. People started preserving cards in mint condition. The sight and sound of baseball cards flapping in bike spokes vanished from American neighborhoods. Street lights told you when to go home. Hopscotch courts covered every sidewalk. Jump rope chants passed from child to child like folk song. Marble tournaments determined playground hierarchy. Baseball cards, destroyed in bike spokes, created motorcycle sounds nobody thought about preserving. Childhood was informal, unsupervised, and outside. Comic books in the 1950s cost 10 cents. For a dime, you got 32 pages of full-color adventure. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, crime comics, horror comics, romance comics. Children bought them at drugstores, corner stores, and newsstands. You'd read them dozens of times, trade them with friends, and eventually they'd fall apart from use. Comic books were considered disposable entertainment, not literature. Parents viewed them as juvenile trash, sometimes throwing them away. Some comics were genuinely disturbing. Pre-comics, Code horror comics featured graphic violence and terror. This led to congressional hearings in 1954 about comic books corrupting youth. The Comics Code Authority was created, censoring content. Many publishers went bankrupt. Comic books became sanitized and safe. Then prices crept up. 15 cents, 25 cents, eventually dollars. When comic books started costing more than pocket change in the 1970s, they shifted from mass entertainment to niche hobby. Kids stopped buying them regularly. Comic book stores replaced drugstore racks. The era of 10-cent disposable comic books ended forever. Saturday mornings meant the movie theater matinee. For 25 cents, children would get a double feature, 2 full movies, usually westerns or adventure films, plus a cartoon, a serial chapter, and newsreels. The matinee started at 10 a.m. and ran until 2 or 3 p.m. Parents would drop off their children, leaving them at the theater for hours. The theater was supervised chaos. Hundreds of children screaming, throwing popcorn, running up and down aisles. Theater managers would patrol with flashlights, ejecting troublemakers. The movies were always kid-friendly. Cowboys, Tarzan, science fiction, monster movies. The serial chapter would end on a cliffhanger, ensuring children returned next Saturday. This was affordable babysitting for parents and entertainment for children. Everyone went to Saturday matinees. Then television provided free entertainment at home. By the 1970s, Saturday matinees had mostly ended. Theaters shifted to evening shows. The cultural institution of dropping children at theaters on Saturday mornings disappeared from American childhood. Before the main feature in any 1950s movie theater, you'd watch newsreels, 10-minute films showing recent news events. These weren't optional. They were part of the program. The newsreels had dramatic narration, patriotic music, and footage of world events, political speeches, sporting events, military activities, celebrity appearances, technological innovations. This was how Americans got visual news before television became standard. The newsreels were updated weekly. The same narrator, voice of God style, explained everything happening in the world. Newsreels were propaganda tools, especially during wartime, presenting government-approved perspectives. They'd be shown before comedies, dramas, westerns, every movie, no matter the tone. Then television news became instant. By the late 1960s, newsreels were obsolete. Why wait weeks to see film of events you'd already watched on TV? The last newsreels were produced in 1967. The tradition of watching news before movies ended. Modern theaters show commercials and trailers instead. The newsreel format vanished completely from American culture. movie theaters in the 1950s showed double features as standard programming. You'd pay one admission price, 50 cents or $1, and get two complete movies, not a main film and a short film. Two full-length features, both first-run or recently released. The theaters wanted to give value and keep audiences seated for 3 or 4 hours, selling more concession. Between the two features, they'd show cartoons, newsreels, and previews. You could arrive any time during the program and stay through the next showing, enter during the second feature, watch it end, watch the first feature, then watch the second feature again until you reached your entry point. "This is where we came in," was a common phrase. Drive-in theaters especially featured double features, keeping families entertained from dusk until midnight. When movie production costs increased in the 1970s, double features ended. Studios demanded higher percentages of ticket revenue. Theaters couldn't afford showing two movies for one price. The double feature vanished except for occasional special events. Walk into a 1950s movie theater and uniformed ushers would greet you. They'd tear your ticket, hand you the stub, and escort you to your seat, not just point you toward the correct section, but actually walk you to an available seat, shining a flashlight to guide you in the dark. The ushers wore formal uniforms, pressed pant jackets, bow ties, sometimes military-style caps. They maintained order during the show, telling people to quiet down, removing troublemakers, helping anyone who needed assistance. Between shows, ushers would sweep the aisles and check for forgotten items. Being a theater usher was a respectable job, often held by responsible teenagers or young adults. The ushers created a formal atmosphere, making moviegoing feel like a special event. This service culture ended in the 1970s when theaters cut costs. Ushers disappeared. Customers found their own seats. Theaters became self-service. That personal attention and formal presentation vanished from the movie-going experience. Comic books cost a dime and were meant to be destroyed. Saturday morning movie matinees babysat hundreds of children for a quarter. Newsreels before films showed you the world's events. Double features meant two full movies for one ticket price. Ushers in uniforms escorted you to your seat with a flashlight. Movie theater lobbies in the 1950s had glass display cases filled with candy, and not prepackaged boxes, individual pieces sold by weight or count. You'd walk up to the counter and point 3 packs of jujubes, 2 milk duds, a box of Junior Mints. The counter clerk would hand them to you in small paper bags. Some theaters had penny candy sections where children could buy individual pieces. The candy counter was elaborate, brightly lit, displaying rows of chocolates, hard candies, licorice, and gum. Prices were reasonable. A candy bar cost 5 cents. A box of candy cost 15 cents. The candy was fresh, not stale like modern theater candy that sits for months. Behind the counter worked friendly clerks who knew regular customers and would sometimes give extra pieces to children. The candy counter created personal interaction. Then theaters switched to prepackaged candy in the 1970s, displayed in racks where customers served themselves. The personal candy counter vanished, replaced by self-service efficiency. Nobody asks the candy clerk for recommendations anymore. The smell that filled 1950s movie theater lobbies was real popcorn popping. Theaters had popcorn machines in the lobby, large glass cases where kernels popped continuously in oil and butter. You could watch the process, hear the popping, smell the butter. Popcorn was made in small batches throughout the day, served fresh and hot. The clerk would scoop it from the machine into paper cones or bags, add butter if requested, and hand it to you. The popcorn was crispy, warm, genuinely delicious. It left your fingers greasy and salty. That smell, popping corn and melted butter, became synonymous with movies. Modern theater popcorn is made in bulk hours before showtime, stored in warmers, and served stale. It's pre-popped in factories, shipped frozen, and reheated. The taste is completely different. The smell is artificial butter flavoring sprayed on old popcorn. Real, fresh-popped theater popcorn vanished in the 1980s when theaters prioritized efficiency over quality. The actual smell of popping corn disappeared from movie theaters forever. Before affordable air travel, Americans traveled long distances by Greyhound bus. The bus was primary interstate transportation, comfortable, affordable, and extensive. Greyhound routes connected every city and town. Teenagers took buses to college, soldiers took buses home on leave, families took buses on vacation. The buses were climate-controlled and had reclining seats and made regular stops at Greyhound stations where you could eat, use restrooms, and stretch. Multi-day bus trips were common. Los Angeles to New York took 4 days with overnight travel. People slept on buses, ate at station cafeterias, and watched America pass by the windows. Greyhound stations were social hubs in small towns, meeting places where people gathered. Then airline deregulation in the 1978 made flying cheaper. By the 1980s, bus travel became associated with poverty. Only people who couldn't afford cars or planes took buses. Routes were cut, stations closed. Buses became bare-bones transportation instead of dignified travel. The culture of long-distance bus travel collapsed. Every American town in the 1950s was built around its train depot, and the depot was the most important building, architecturally impressive, centrally located, constantly busy. Trains arrived and departed throughout the day, carrying passengers, mail, and freight. The depot was where townspeople gathered, meeting arriving relatives, seeing off departing soldiers, watching trains pass through. Inside were waiting rooms, ticket windows, restaurants, and newsstands. Train travel was comfortable and social. You'd sit in coach cars, strike up conversations with strangers, eat in dining cars with tablecloths and real silverware. Overnight trains had sleeping berths. The train connected small towns to the larger world. Then interstate highways and cheap flights killed passenger rail. The station wagon was the minivan of the 1950s and 60s, the default family vehicle. These were large cars with extended rear cargo areas and rear-facing third-row seats. Children would sit in the way back, facing out the rear window, watching the road disappear behind them. No seatbelts, no car seats. Kids would tumble around the cargo area during trips. Station wagons hauled lumber, groceries, camping gear, bicycles, everything. The rear gate opened downward, creating a platform for sitting or loading. Some had fake wood paneling on the sides, the woody look that became iconic. Families would pack 7 or 8 people into station wagons for vacations, children piled on top of luggage. Personal candy counters where clerks served you individually. Popcorn popped fresh in lobby machines all day long. Greyhound buses took you across the country affordably and comfortably. Train depots were the most important buildings in every town. Station wagons hauled entire families and all their vacation gear in the way back. The 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air represented the peak of American car culture. Chrome everywhere, tail fins, two-tone paint, massive V8 engines. Owning a Bel Air meant you'd made it. The car was flashy but affordable, accessible to middle-class families. Chevrolet sold over 1.5 million units in 1957 alone. The Bel Air had style, sweeping lines, exaggerated features, and presence. It was designed to look fast even standing still. The cars came in wild color combinations: turquoise and white, pink and charcoal, coral and ivory, chrome-covered bumpers, grills, door handles, and trim. The interiors had bench seats, metal dashboards, and simple mechanical controls. No computers, no electronics, just engine and steel. Teenagers dreamed of owning Bel Air. They represented freedom, style, and American prosperity. Then gas crises in the 1970s killed big American cars. Walk into a 1950s kitchen and everything gleamed with chrome. Toasters, blenders, coffee percolators, waffle irons, mixers, all encased in shiny chrome plating. Chrome represented modernity, hygiene, and prosperity. Keeping chrome polished was constant work. Fingerprints and water spots showed immediately, requiring regular buffing with special polish. But chrome appliances looked futuristic, like something from science fiction. The appliances were heavy, built from steel and chrome, designed to last decades. They had simple mechanical switches, no digital displays, no circuit boards. When they broke, you could repair them, unscrew the housing, replace a worn part, reassemble. Chrome wasn't just finish, it was identity. Chrome diners, chrome car bumpers, chrome furniture. Then plastics replaced chrome in the 1970s. Plastic was cheaper, lighter, and required no polishing. The chrome aesthetic disappeared. Modern appliances are plastic, glass, and brushed stainless steel. The ultra-shiny chrome kitchen vanished forever. The space-age optimism it represented vanished with it. Bathrooms in 1950s, homes were colorful. Pink toilets, mint green bathtubs, yellow sinks, not white, bright pastels. Homeowners would coordinate everything, matching tiles, matching fixtures, matching towels. A pink bathroom would have pink toilet, pink tub, pink sink, pink and black tiles, and pink accessories. These weren't tacky, they were fashionable, modern, expensive. Colored porcelain fixtures cost more than white. Having a colored bathroom signaled you had money and style. The colors were baked into the porcelain, permanent. These bathrooms were built to last. Many 1950s homes still have original colored fixtures because replacing them is expensive. Then bathroom fashion shifted to white and neutral colors in the 1970s. Roller skates in the 1950s were metal contraptions that clamped onto your regular shoes and tightened with a skate key. The wheels were metal, the plates were metal, the adjustable clamps were metal. They made tremendous noise rolling on sidewalks, a rumbling, grinding sound you'd hear from blocks away. Skating required skill because the skates would loosen and fall off your shoes. You'd be skating along and suddenly one skate would detach, sending you sprawling. Everyone carried skate keys, small metal tools, on strings around their necks or attached to shoelaces. Tighten skates too much, and they'd hurt your feet. The original Mr. Potato Head, introduced in 1952, didn't include a plastic potato body. It was just a box of plastic facial features, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, hat, pipe, that you stuck into a real potato from your kitchen. The pieces had sharp pins on the back that you'd jam into potato flesh. You'd create faces, personalities, scenarios, using real vegetables. The kit also worked with carrots, cucumbers, and other produce. This made the toy cheap. Parents bought one set of pieces, and potatoes were free. But it also made the toy temporary and kind of gross. The potato would rot. After a few days, your Mr. Potato Head would get soft, moldy, and smell terrible. You'd throw it away and stab a fresh potato. In 1964, the company added a plastic potato body because parents complained about wasted food and rotting vegetables. The plastic potato eliminated the organic weirdness that made the original toy unique. Modern children have never experienced stabbing facial features into real vegetables. The Chevy Bel Air was the car everyone dreamed about. Chrome covered every kitchen appliance, requiring constant polishing. Photography in the 1950s meant the Brownie camera, a simple box camera made by Kodak that anyone could afford and operate. The Brownie cost about $3 and used roll film. You'd look through a tiny viewfinder on top, point at your subject, and press the button. That was it. No focus adjustment, no exposure settings, no flash. The camera held enough film for 8 or 12 pictures. After shooting the entire roll, you'd take it to a drugstore for developing. A week later, you'd pick up your prints, small, square, black and white photographs, grainy and imperfect but precious. You never knew if your pictures turned out until you got them back. Bad lighting? Blurry subject, finger over the lens. You'd only discover these mistakes days later. Photography required planning and patience. Every picture cost money to develop, so you didn't waste shots. Every neighborhood in 1950s America had dozens of red radio flyer wagons. These weren't toys, they were utility vehicles. Children hauled toys, siblings, pets, rocks, sticks, and treasures in them. Parents used them for gardening, hauling groceries from the car, and moving heavy items. The wagons were indestructible steel with wooden side panels and metal wheels. They'd last for decades, passed down through multiple children. The wagons made distinctive rattling sounds rolling over sidewalks. Kids would pack 4 or 5 friends into one wagon and race downhill, crashing spectacularly at the bottom. The wagons appeared in every parade, decorated for holidays. Toddlers rode in them to the park. Injured children were pulled home in them after playground accidents. When Disneyland opened on July 17, 1955, it created a cultural moment that defined 1950s optimism. This wasn't just an amusement park. This was the future, a fully themed environment where fantasy became reality. Opening day was televised live, hosted by future President Ronald Reagan. Families planned pilgrimages to California, specifically to visit Disneyland. Going to Disneyland became a milestone childhood experience, something parents saved for and planned meticulously. The park represented post-war prosperity. Americans had enough money and leisure time to spend on pure entertainment. Disneyland created new expectations about family vacations and themed experiences. Before Disneyland, amusement parks were local affairs with mechanical rides. After Disneyland, they became destinations with narratives and immersion. That 1955 opening day optimism, the belief that technology and creativity could build better worlds, captured the 1950s spirit perfectly. Halloween costumes in the 1950s were homemade from household items. The classic was the ghost. Cut eye holes in an old bedsheet, throw it over your head, done. Pirates were created with scarves and eye patches. Hobos wore old clothes with painted-on dirt. Princesses wore their mother's old dresses. Cowboys wore jeans and bandanas. Parents didn't buy costumes. They improvised from closets and fabric scraps. The costumes were crude, barely recognizable, often uncomfortable. The bedsheet ghost costume resulted in countless children tripping over fabric and stumbling through neighborhoods partially blind. But the homemade nature was the point. Creativity mattered more than accuracy. You'd explain your costume to every adult, "I'm a robot," while wearing a cardboard box with aluminum foil. Store-bought costumes existed but were considered cheating. When mass-produced character costumes became standard in the 1970s, plastic masks and printed smocks, the homemade costume tradition died. Modern children wear store-bought costumes costing $50 or more. The creativity and improvisation disappeared completely. This wasn't about perfection. This was about imagination. A broom became a witch's transportation. A pillowcase became a superhero's cape. A parent's oversized coat became a detective's disguise. Children learned resourcefulness, learned to see potential in ordinary objects, learned that transformation didn't require money, just vision. Children in the 1950s rode bicycles with zero safety equipment. No helmets, no knee pads, no elbow pads, no reflective clothing. You'd ride barefoot in summer, often without even shoes. Multiple kids would pile onto one bike, one on the seat, one on the handlebars, one standing on the rear axle pegs. You'd ride down steep hills at dangerous speeds, jump makeshift ramps, and perform stunts that would horrify modern parents. Injuries happened constantly: scraped knees, road rash, occasional broken bones. Children would crash, get up, and keep riding. Parents never considered buying helmets because helmets didn't exist for casual cycling. They were racing equipment, not safety gear. This wasn't neglect. This was normal. Children were expected to take risks, learn from mistakes, and develop judgment through experience. Then helmet laws began passing in the 1990s. Safety culture took over. Modern parents won't let children ride to the corner without full protective gear. That era of fearless, unprotected bicycle freedom ended forever. The freedom wasn't just physical. It was psychological. Children learned their own limits through trial and error. They calculated risks independently. They experienced consequences directly. Crash hard, feel pain, learn to be more careful next time. No adult intervened. No adult softened the lesson. The bicycle was laboratory for risk assessment. 105 things. Gone. Not misplaced. Not stored away in attics waiting to be rediscovered. Gone completely from American life. The milkman doesn't knock anymore. The Fuller brushman stopped coming. Your grandmother's Jell-O molds gather dust in antique stores are priced as curiosities instead of kitchen essentials. The soda fountain, where teenagers spent entire afternoons on 15-cent cherry Cokes, was demolished decades ago, replaced by a parking lot that serves a Starbucks. This wasn't gradual evolution. This was wholesale replacement. We didn't adapt these things to modern life. We erased them. Every single item on this list represented something deeper than the object itself. The milkman wasn't just delivering dairy. He was daily human connection. Party line telephones weren't just shared phone service. They were forced community interaction. Sock hops weren't just dances. They were supervised spaces where teenagers learned social skills. Front porch sitting wasn't just evening relaxation. It was how neighborhoods became communities instead of collections of strangers. We traded all of it for convenience, for speed, for efficiency, for privacy. And we got exactly what we wanted. We can now order milk online and have it delivered without ever speaking to a human. We can communicate with anyone instantly without sharing a phone line. We can entertain ourselves alone in climate-controlled rooms instead of sitting on porches talking to neighbors. We won. We got everything modern life promised. But what did we lose? We lost the patience that came from waiting for the percolator to finish brewing. We lost the skills that came from reading paper maps and navigating without computers. We lost the trust that came from leaving doors unlocked and keys with neighbors. We lost the effort that made hand-cranked ice cream taste better than anything from a store. We lost the accountability that came from living in communities where everyone knew your name